Over the last few days, my parents have accidentally gone pretty viral for their parenting. Let me back up and give you some context here. I participated in a TikTok trend that's happening currently called weird things my family did growing up. And I was like, you know what? I had a lot of funny and fond memories of just little habits that my family did growing up that I thought were kind of unique. So I started this TikTok. About halfway through, I realized, because now I'm seeing this from the adult perspective instead of the child's perspective of my childhood, that wait a minute, these weren't just fun little funny things. These were actually brilliant parenting hacks that my parents were very intentionally doing. And because of that, this first initial video went pretty viral. I think it's at about 10 million views across both TikTok and Instagram. There's news articles about it. And I've turned it into a bit of a spin-off series over on my TikTok, just going further into depth and answering different questions about little things that my parents did. So I thought, I'm just gonna compile this all in one long form video and one easy resource. So welcome to today's video. All of the very unique and honestly pretty brilliant things that my parents did to parent us growing up. I actually just got off the phone with my mom. She had no idea that they've gone viral. I've been trying to get a hold of them for a few days. They've been on a trip, completely unplugged, and literally 10 minutes ago I said, hey, you've gone viral. And they were honestly shocked and honored, and I was able to get some additional thoughts from her about just parenting in general. As mentioned in this TikTok, a lot of funny little things. One was we had even and odd days for the front seat. My sister and I, we are two children, and as a way to not fight over who gets the front seat, it was just understood. One of us had even days, one of us had odd days. I was the eldest sister though, so I had a few years of knowledge and experience on Jacqueline, and I realized a lot of months end in the 31st and then start with the 1st. So if I chose odd, sometimes I'd get back-to-back days. So I did indeed choose odd numbers. They gamified so many little things that could have otherwise ended in fights like that. Also, with our breakfasts, we had even and odd days as well. Of course, all we wanted was like Lucky Charms, Fruit Loops. I was a big Cinnamon Toast Crunch girl. We wanted that sugary cereal, but my mom was like, okay, we also need to make sure we get some protein, some fiber. So it was just understood that every other day we'd get to have our favorite cereal, but then every other day we would have fruit and eggs and things to actually be substantial for our brains as developing children. So that also was just an understanding. No fights involved. We just could look forward to the even days that we got our sugary cereals. This is smart and honestly might need to be revised for current children since technology is more and more integrated to our daily life. And honestly, it is very beneficial for children to understand how to operate and utilize technology for their futures. But back in the early 2000s, when all we really had was like a desktop computer and a TV, during the summers, my mom would give us poker chips. These poker chips were equivalent to, I forget if it was 10 or 15 minutes, but for the sake of just the explanation, let's say 10 minutes. And we'd get 3 of those every single day. We could cash those in for, 10 minutes of computer and then one quick 20-minute episode. We could save all 3 chips and spend 30 minutes on the computer. Or if there was a movie or something that we really wanted to watch, we could save our chips for a few days. And then after maybe 4 days of saving our chips, we would have enough to cash in to sit down and watch a full 2-hour movie. I think that helped us really limit our screen time, but also helped us to have delayed gratification and almost kind of understand budgeting in a sense of like, I could have this little bit now, or I could save and have this big thing later. And I think that was impactful. A lot of people in my comments said, what did you do if you didn't have screen time? Like, how did you entertain yourselves? I have such fond memories of having the hugest craft cabinet ever. There was paint, there was colors, there was paper mache. The thing I loved was those little beads that you put on that little pegboard and then you melt it with an iron and they melt together. I loved that. I would just craft all day long, and my parents also very much encouraged us playing with food, which I also loved. And I'll tell you a couple ways that they gamified that. One of the things that I'm most looking forward to showing future children is how to play with food in the kitchen, because I realize you learn math, you learn science, you learn arts, you learn how to plate and make things beautiful, but then you're also learning very valuable life skills of how to feed yourself and just operate a kitchen. My favorite memory was we, in the summers usually too, or weekends, would have challenges and we would have teams. Usually it was me and my mom versus my sister and my dad, and each of us would take turns having a dinner, but we would create a theme. It was almost like a party for the four of us. So maybe the theme would be Surf's Up, and we would think of a menu that just felt very tropical and like surfy, and we would just brainstorm and research, but then we would decorate the table to go with the theme as well. So maybe we'd buy little surfboards or like cut out little surfboards out of paper to be the name cards, whatever. And my parents would let us go to the store, obviously with them, but do all the shopping ourselves. So we would have our recipe, we would have our budget, and we would go around and get all the ingredients needed and make sure it fit within our budget. And it really felt like we were hosting our own dinner party. I loved it so much. We would just try to out-theme each other. Obviously, there's no way to win because it's 2 against 2, but we would just try to one-up each other every single time as a challenge. And to this day, I am a sucker for hosting like a themed event and a themed party. And so I think that that was really instilled in me at that time. Speaking of hosting though, I also have such a fond memory of my parents hosting different dinner parties and things of the sort. They would let us help create the atmosphere and the vibe. And I just felt so much pride in having people over and having the atmosphere perfectly curated. I remember I loved my Heelys. I would put on my Heelys and Heely around the house and light every single candle I possibly could. I would dim the lights. I would choose a playlist. I was like 7 and they were letting me do all of this in preparation for having people over to our home and like having community with them. And as a person who is pretty highly sensitive to my surroundings, I loved making sure every single thing was just right. Like the music wasn't too loud, the lights weren't too bright. And to this day, it's something that I love to do. I love to have people over, and they made it fun. They didn't make it feel like people are coming over, everybody has to clean. They were like, people are coming over, like how should we make this special for them? Something else that really taught us about budgeting and finances were our optional chores. We had mandatory chores that we were not paid for. It was just the expectation of being part of the family, part of the household. That included things like obviously keeping our room clean, deep cleaning our bathroom with soft scrub and, window cleaner and mirrors and the glass and all that, taking care of all the pets, just that type of thing. But there was optional above and beyond chores if we chose that oftentimes included weeding the garden, cleaning the baseboards, just like the things that weren't necessary per se, but would be nice to have done. If we completed our optional chores, we would get $12. 12 was my family's favorite number, so I always remember that. And then we had 3 piggy banks they set up. They wrote on them and encouraged us. It wasn't forced, but it was encouraged for us to put 10% into generosity, 40% into savings, and then 50% into play. We could spend that however we wanted. And they were like, this is what we do and this is what we recommend you do as well. You don't have to do it, but I did do it. I felt like, oh, great, this is how we should do it. I'm gonna do it this way. And the 10% could go towards any form of generosity, whether it was giving to a charity, tithing to church, whatever that might be, which as a side note, I was raised non-denominational Christian. When I said this on TikTok, a lot of people assumed that we were LDS, and we were not. And then 40% would go into savings for something big down the line, whatever that might be. And 50%, $6 a week, I would just take to the craft store and get some more craft supplies. I would blow through my money, let me tell you what. A lot of our time together was spent playing games, and I now realize that they chose games that were great for just us learning how to count, how to spell, all sorts of things. Our go-to was Rummikub and Scrabble, but our number one was we would play spades because cards could just fit in a bag wherever we go. To this day, my family still plays spades everywhere we go. When it's the 4 of us, we take it to lunch, we take it to coffee shops, we take it to the beach, we take it everywhere. Now that we're older, we love to stay up late with a bottle of wine and all play spades. It's great bonding without a screen. We're using our brains, but we're talking between. We have music going. Something else I love about my parents, this is just a side note, they always have music on. It sets the vibe. It's just immaculate. I know y'all have seen some episodes of Dad Camp if you watch my channel. My dad has, now that I am an adult and a homeowner, continued on something that we started as children. But as a kid, my dad would very intentionally teach me how things worked and why. A couple that I remember very vividly were once he showed me how a toilet filled and flushed and like took off the back of the toilet, showed me what all the little parts did, how a toilet flushed, how to plunge a toilet, how to shut off the water if a toilet was overflowing, and I was just fascinated. Another time I remember he took me into his office where he had a globe and he had a flashlight, and he showed me how the rotation of the earth and the sun works and why the sun is at slightly different positions as the year changes. And I, looking back, call that dad camp. But now as an adult, whenever he's visiting out here, he'll show me a lot of things that are just helpful homeowner tips, and I call it dad camp still. Like recently, he showed me how to switch out a light plate to have dimmers. He showed me how to completely sand and refinish and stain and seal all of my outdoor furniture. He showed me how to strip and stain my deck, just like helpful little things that otherwise I wouldn't have known. And I do consider myself to be a little bit handy. I might not be the best at things, but I'm usually able to kind of understand a little bit of how things work and complete some of the little house projects on my own at home, and I credit that to him for sure. Another thing that was just kind of gamified was bedtime. I now know, since babysitting other people's children, that bedtime can be the hardest time of night, just getting them to finally wind down and like go to sleep. But they created something that was just fun. We called it our campfire. There was not a real fire. Some people were confused on TikTok, but basically what it was is we all just sat in a little circle, kind of like a campfire. We were able to bring any of our stuffed animals or dolls or whatever to sit with us in the circle to join. And in this circle, the four of us would sometimes recap the day. Maybe there was a little story that we would read, and then we would always pray, and we had this like little song that we sang before we went to bed. It's really cute. Obviously this is when we were younger, but I feel like it went on maybe till I was like 9 or 10. So till I was quite a bit older, but I loved it. It was the perfect little, like, we knew exactly what to expect. Took 10, 12 minutes, and boom, we all went to bed. Something else that my parents intentionally took us to do, usually once or twice a month, was there was this program where we went to downtown San Antonio with all of us together, and we would feed the unhoused community there. And something that I very much appreciate them doing is they didn't like helicopter parent us. They didn't make us feel any sort of afraid or unsafe. Of course, there were safety precautions in place, and they made sure that we were being supervised and all that, but they allowed us, our own little tiny human personalities, to go off on our own and have discussions and conversations with all of the people there and build like genuine relationships. And I think that that made it so glaringly obvious what privilege we had, and being exposed to that at a continuous basis made us so grateful for our lives and having a roof over our head. But I have fond memories too. There's this one lady I remember so specifically where we exchanged bracelets. I wore her bracelet forever, and when I would go and see her again, she was still wearing my bracelet. And just them allowing us to build our own like conversations and relationships with these people, I think made us feel like individuals, and I'm sure was appreciated by everybody that was there too. You know, it was like a lot of destigmatizing was happening, and it was really beautiful. And I'm thankful that they expose us to that on a consistent basis. Something else that my mom did with me, probably for the first 4 years of my life, is we had a once a week standing date with another mother-daughter. And what we would do is learn about a different culture's food. And sometimes we would go out on the special occasions to be able to like taste this new cuisine and learn about it. But a lot of times we'd also just make it at home. My friend's mom loved to cook and kind of like led the whole thing. And I think for the first few years of my life, being exposed to a completely different palate than what the normal suburbs kid in Houston, Texas was able to eat, I think made me really appreciate food and new flavors. And that is something that's really carried on to my adulthood as well. I'm always seeking out new flavors. I want to try new tastes. I want to learn. I'm just fascinated by food and how different food could taste, how differently it could be presented. I think those things implemented even just in the first few years of life actually really does shape what you like and what you're interested in as an adult, which is pretty fascinating. Another fond memory and activity that I remember from my toddler to early elementary school ages was we would take bracelet walks. I think my parents actually got this from one of our babysitters. She did it with us and then we just kept doing it. I'm not gonna lie, I was not a kid that loved activity, like out and about physical activity. I wanted to craft, I wanted to cook. I did not love walking the block. So I think as a way to get me out into nature a little bit, they kind of crafted that. They made it a little more enticing with the craft. And we would take duct tape inside out around our wrist and take a walk and look for the prettiest flowers, the prettiest leaves, anything that we could just find from nature, pick it or get it off the ground and add it to our little bracelet. And by the end of our walk, we would have a completely different nature-inspired bracelet every single time. And I loved it. I thought it was so much fun. I could not wait for our next walk because I wanted to make another nature bracelet. And I think so much of this boils down to gamifying things that are good for a child to do. As soon as it's fun, the child is like stoked to do it. I was so stoked to cook or to walk or to do all these things because they had a gamification element to it. Similarly, I think my parents really encouraged reading as well, because one thing that they let me do, which was such a fun memory, they let me take all the clothes out of my closet, put it in a dresser instead, and my dad helped me build a bookcase, and we turned my little closet into like a private reading hideout. I covered the whole thing with posters from there was those magazines, J6 or J, someone remind me what that was called. Different kid magazines that had posters inside of it. Hung lights, had a little beanbag chair, and I felt like if my parents put me to bed, I could sneak out of my bed and go into my little hideout and read for 30 minutes, and I kind of felt like, ooh, rebellious. I was reading. They made it seem so fun to have a secret hideout that was all mine and that was curated specifically to read with all of my books in the little bookcase there. I could go on talking about this forever, but I'm going to cut myself off there and I'm going to get into some of the rules that they had for us, because at the end of the day, they were strict. I'm not going to lie about that. A lot of my parents' rules were kind of developmental focused. I realize now that I couldn't do certain things until certain ages and then I would be able to do it. They also were very strict on the media that we consumed, which I am grateful for in hindsight because that can really get in your head. But for example, I remember we couldn't have ear piercings until 10. I think we couldn't have sleepovers till 10 or 12. We couldn't have cell phones until 13, but they were not smartphones. They were just a text. We couldn't have boyfriends until we were 16. Also, for them, they were like PG-13 is for 13. You cannot watch PG-13 until you're 13. R is for 18. You cannot watch R-rated movies until you are an adult and out of the house. We did watch Passion of the Christ though, which was rated R. But also the media that we would consume, they were just so aware of everything that was going to be in that movie or that book before we consumed it. They would go on this website and they would see the timestamps of all the things that would happen. So if there was an intimate scene, they would know it happened from this timestamp to this timestamp. Or if there was a drunken bar fight, it would happen from this time to that, so that they could know I'm okay with them seeing this, but maybe we'll skip this. They actually paid for this software, which is crazy that it existed back then, where you put a DVD player into it and you can choose which timestamps to skip. So sometimes it would skip a whole scene, sometimes it would skip a couple minutes. I remember being a kid and being like, wait, Mom, we lost part of the storyline though. They put a lot of work into that. In terms of tech, one rule that they had is they didn't really want us to initiate texts to boys, which we always were like, okay. But I think that they wanted us to not be the type of person that just chased a boy. They wanted us to learn that we are worthy of being pursued. So I respect it as well. But there was a loophole that if we had a question about homework or an assignment, we were allowed to initiate. So of course we found that loophole and utilized it as much as we could. I would be like, hello, I know we're not in the same math class, but do you know? It's really funny in hindsight. Also, they did make it known that if they needed to check our devices, they would, if they felt there would be, a safety concern or anything of the sort. But if they did not feel there was a need, they would respect our privacy. To my knowledge, I don't think that they checked either of our devices ever. I don't think they read through our texts or our social media. because we never gave them a reason to. However, they did always have our location, which I think is so normal and honestly so safe for so many reasons. But I didn't realize that they checked it more often than I thought, because once in high school, I stopped at my boyfriend's house on the way home from school for 10 minutes just to tell him hi before coming on home. And I got a call from my mom, and she was like, hey, you didn't let me know that you were going to be coming somewhere between school and home, and in the future, if you could let me know so I could be aware of like what your plans are, that would be much appreciated. And I was like, oh wow, they do check my location. Okay, cool. In terms of consequences and punishments, we did not often give them a reason to have consequences or punishment. We genuinely both wanted to be good kids. I think it's because we felt loved and respected, and we love and respected them. We didn't want to act out or to do anything wrong. As a younger kid though, I do remember just getting into a little bit of trouble here and there, and they would always make us go and apologize to the person that was affected. They were so mindful to never let themselves seem like angry or flustered, so it never felt like we were emotionally afraid of them, but we did have to own up to our actions. I have a specific memory of prank calling a neighbor's mom, and I don't remember what we said, probably some sort of childish potty humor, and word got back to my mom, and she had us walk over there and apologize. It was like me and all of my cousins. We all had to walk over there and apologize, and I was mortified. But I think that that was a really healthy way for them to handle that. As a teenager, I'm trying to remember if we ever had any major consequences. I never was grounded. I never had things taken away from me. We would sometimes have like sit down, more serious conversations, but beyond that, I guess we didn't give them much of a reason. So I'm curious what their plan would have been if we did something like massively bad. I actually should ask my mom that. That would be an interesting question. That's something that's fascinating about both my sister and I is we both very much cared about academics, but my parents never, ever once vocalized them caring about academics. They never once said, I hope you get good grades, I hope you try hard in school. They never put that pressure on us. And I think because of that, we wanted it for ourselves. This sounds like braggy to say out loud, but I just mean it as anecdotal evidence. We both graduated top 3 to 5% of our high school class. We both graduated college early. We just like took that on as our own responsibility. I cannot remember a single time my parents saying that they wanted us to try in school. Of course, when we did well, they'd be like, wow, you're crushing it. Good job. We're proud of you. But they never made it an expectation, and there was a time here or there where I would get a bad grade and they would never make me feel bad about it because they could tell I was devastated about it. They're like, it's okay. You can like try again. You'll make it up. You'll whatever. And I think that made us not resent working hard in school because it felt like our own choice and not an expectation placed upon us. A lot of similarities were also there with faith, religion, and Christianity. Both my sister and I are still Christians to this day. And I do think it's kind of rare to not have a child go through like a deconstruction phase or walk away from it or drift away from it or walk away and then come back. But I could honestly do a whole separate video on how my parents approached faith and how they never made it feel suffocating. They never pushed it down our throats, and they always made it feel like our choice. And I think that has given me a healthy relationship with Christ on my own as an adult. Like I said, I could talk about this for a million years because I do really admire my parents, and I'm so glad for the way that they intentionally parented us. I also have a TikTok talking about how I think their parenting methods affected us, and I was as honest as possible. I talked about the pros and cons and like ways that I feel like I've fallen short and ways that we could grow. Okay, getting into some things from Mama Janse. One of the most FAQs on TikTok were what were her favorite parenting books? And so I asked her that, and she said the one that comes to mind the most is a book called Parenting with Love and Logic. I Googled this book. It was written in 1990. I don't know how relevant the information still is. I also feel like parenting has kind of changed since the 90s. So I have not read it. Take it with a grain of salt. That's just the one that she felt impacted her the most. Also, when I called her this morning, she said, you know what's so funny is in one of the videos that we filmed together forever ago, I actually had you write down some things and put it in the description box. And I found it the other day because I was thinking about it or someone asked me something about it, and I read through it and I still stand by it. So this is from a video from 2022. This is what my mom said are her top 10 things that she wanted to include that she didn't include in the video that we had filmed. 1, allow your child to feel safe, loved, and listened to. 2, prayer. I got connected with some moms my age to pray through an international organization called Moms in Prayer. It was my lifeline and truly the best to help me in parenting. To find a group near you, there's still a website, and I think it's momsinprayer.org. 3, read parenting books, take classes offered, take advantage of resources offered. For newborns and toddlers, baby-wise. For elementary school age, Parenting with Love and Logic. For teens, Parenting Q app. And for pre-teens, devotionals. The Parenting Q app has devotionals. Okay. 4, love and show interest in what your kids like. 5, make family memories, have family jokes. 6, don't promise things too far ahead so you can keep your promises without being resentful. This is one thing I do remember her saying all the time is she learned the hard way that she wouldn't say, hey girls, in 2 weeks, we're going to Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. Because then, maybe in 2 weeks from then, she would wake up and she would have a migraine. She suffered with migraines a lot through our childhood. And she was like, oh man, I can't take it away because I told them I want to keep my promise, but like I can't go. I'll be resentful. I feel bad. So instead she started just telling us like when it was time, like, hey girls, put on your shoes because guess where we're going? We're going to Six Flags right now. And that also made her feel like such a fun, spontaneous mom instead of like kind of dangling something over our head, not knowing what the vibes were going to be when we got there. 7, make time for fun after you and your child complete work and responsibilities. 8, shower at night, laughy face. Then you'll be more willing to play hard with your kids during the day without worrying about looking or smelling your best. Honestly, practical. 9, don't pay for chores that are routine. 10, be the person you want your child to be. I heard a wise friend say recently, who gave up an addiction when he had a child, that you choose them, they didn't choose you. So all of that is very impactful. And like I said, I could talk about this for a million years, and I wish mom and dad were in town while all of this was happening so that I could get them to sit down for a more in-depth interview. But let me know if you would like any additional parts of the series. We could dive more into faith, or we could ask them specific questions and I can get their answers and we could talk through that. So let me know. I have just been impacted by the way that this series on TikTok has impacted other people, because I do feel so privileged and lucky to have had the experience that I did growing up and to have a loving and healthy family, because I know that that is honestly rare, truly. And I'm thankful. So if I can share that with anybody else instead of just keeping it all for myself and my experiences just as mine, I would love to do that. So you guys let me know and I will make it happen. I love y'all so much. I hope you have the best rest of your day, and I'll see you in another video very